officers and members of the National Grange, state and local Granges across this great nation, and all committed to strengthening rural America and our hometowns. For almost 160 years, the Grange has stood as proof that when ordinary people come together with purpose, we can do extraordinary things. In the days ahead, we will set policy, elect leaders, and chart a course for the future. Before we turn to that work, let us look beyond our convention and toward something bigger, the state of rural America and what the Grange can do, will do, and must do to strengthen it. Our founders were not afraid of change. They were the change. They took the isolation, inequity, and division of their time and built a movement that connected farmers to neighbors, citizens to their government, and people to purpose and passion. That spirit must guide us again today. The measure of our organization, like the measure of our nation, is not found in comfort, but in courage. The Grange has never been content to comment from the sidelines. When we see a need, we meet it. When we see a problem, we solve it. When we see a challenge, we face it together. Today, the needs are many, the challenges are real, and so too are the opportunities and the people ready to seize them. Across this nation, in rural towns and city neighborhoods alike, there are men and women, young and old, looking for connection, for meaning, for a way to serve. The Grange must be the place they find it. What it means to be American. We gather at a time when the ground beneath America feels unsteady, when politics divide more than they unite, when too many families go hungry, when housing is priced out of reach, and when the lights of opportunity flicker in small towns and rural places once rich with promise. The Grange has always known that the true measure of a nation is not taken in moments of abundance, but in how it safeguards its people when times are lean. America is not merely a place, it is an ideal, an enduring promise of dignity, fairness, and shared humanity. Our founders of this nation and of this order knew that freedom is sustained not by isolation, but by interdependence. To be American is to recognize that we are not bound by uniformity, but by mutual responsibility. The understanding that my neighbor's well-being and my own are inseparable. To be American is to believe that no child should go hungry, no elder forgotten, and no person denied the tools to build a better tomorrow. These are the foundations of that beloved and beleaguered American dream. These beliefs are why the Grange still matters. We remind this nation and ourselves that strength is found in service, that dignity is born of work, and that compassion is not weakness, but wisdom. A crisis of civility and trust. Today, the tone of our national life has hardened. Attacks on public officials and civic leaders form threats to from threats to acts of violence have shaken our collective conscience and struck at the very heart of public service and civic trust. This cannot be who we are. From the grassroots to the highest offices in the land, we must rebuild the habits of civility and cooperation, not for one party or for a group of people, but for the good of the nation itself. We were founded to rise above partisanship, to build understanding across divides, to make democracy work, to be patriots, not partisans. Patriotism isn't about shouting louder, it's about listening longer. It's about seeing our neighbor as human, deserving of dignity and respect. The American quilt. America is often been called a melting pot, but that's not quite right. We are not a stew that blurs our differences into sameness. We are a quilt, a patchwork of people, communities, cultures, each with its own story, its own color, and its own strength. Each town is a block, each family a piece of fabric, and the Grange and organizations like ours are steady hands and strong thread working to stitch this nation together, to mend what is frayed and to strengthen what holds. That thread does not ask where you come from, what you look like, or who you voted for. It simply binds us in common cause to make life better, to protect what we love, and to leave this country stronger than we found it. America 250, renewing the promise of rural America. As our nation approaches its 250th year, the Grange calls on every American, rural and urban, young and old, first generation or 15th, to rededicate ourselves to the ideals that shaped this republic: liberty, equality, justice, fellowship, and service. Participation has always been the essence of being American. It means being part of the discussion, part of the process, and part of the solution. Citizenship is not a spectator sport. It is participation grounded in respect, guided by purpose, and measured not in rhetoric, but in results. We have seen time and again that when rural voices are absent, or when those who care about rural prosperity are not in the room, the essentials of our quality of life are the first to be trimmed from the budgets. Programs that increase food security, improve healthcare, support housing, and invest in rural development don't just vanish from spreadsheets. They disappear from main streets, from hospital corridors, from the daily lives of families forced to choose between prescriptions and fuel. That is not a failure of policy. It is a failure of presence. Our task is to ensure that rural America is represented whenever and wherever decisions are made. Rural America is not a museum exhibit. It is the living engine of our food, our fiber, fuel, and our fellowship. We are perfectly positioned to be that voice in many rooms because the Grange has never been about standing still. We cannot and will not stand still now. Across this country, our halls and our members remain those tight stitches that hold communities together through storms and seasons of drought. It is to those issues, to agriculture and fair markets, to healthcare and insurance, to infrastructure and education, and to the call to make service commonplace again, that we now turn, carrying forward our founders' conviction that the Grange must always be the movement where progress and principle meet. Agriculture, the backbone of a nation. Our nation's story has always been written in the furrows of its fields. The hands that till the soil have built not only our harvests, but our hope. From the beginning, the Grange has stood with those hands, with the farmers, ranchers, foresters, and fishers, whose labor sustains both our economy and our ideals. Let us then turn to where all life begins, the land. Stewards, sentinels, and national security. For generations, the American farmer has been both steward and sentinel, steward of our soil and sentinel of our security. Today, that legacy stands at a crossroads. We know that in agriculture, fairness is not just an economic question. It is a question of sovereignty, survival, and stewardship for the generations to come. This year, nearly 30 states have taken steps to restrict foreign ownership of farmland, an overdue recognition that farm security is national security. The USDA's new National Farm Security Action Plan rightly identifies the danger of foreign adversaries gaining control of land, labs, and supply chains. We agree that American farmland must remain in American hands. We also remind policymakers that protectionism must never become paralysis, and that securing our land must never mean locking out the next generation of American farmers, whether large-scale operations, family farms, or homesteaders who seek to work it. The truth is that foreign investment in U.S. farmland remains modest, just over 3% of total acreage, and much of it is in the hands of trusted allies. The real threat to our agricultural independence is not foreign ownership. It is the erosion of opportunity, the loss of young farmers, of regional infrastructure, and of fair, stable markets. In Grange's from North Carolina to Northern California sit producers who've mortgaged everything twice, once for seed, once for hope. They aren't asking for sympathy, they're asking for stability, for a market that rewards work instead of volatility. America continues to lose farms, the equivalent of more than one farm a day disappearing. Every acre lost to speculation or sprawl is an acre lost to our food system and our future. That's why USDA's National Farm Security Action Plan and the wave of nearly 30 state laws on foreign farmland are so important. They protect food and national security without vilifying immigrant farmers. Trade, tariffs, and market stability. Trade wars, tariffs, and bailouts are no substitute for market stability. Throughout history, nations have learned the hard way that tariffs and retaliation rarely lead to prosperity. They lead to lost markets, higher costs, and lasting uncertainty. When export markets are disrupted, family farms pay the price. When tariffs restrict critical imports, fertilizer ingredients, rare earth minerals, chemical compounds, productivity suffers across the entire economy. Negotiating fair and reciprocal trade agreements takes time, discipline, and trust. But that hard work pays off. A 10 to 15 billion bailout may patch a wound, but it doesn't heal the system. Bailouts are not a business plan. They are a short-term bridge through a period of transition. Recent trade actions have triggered retaliation from major buyers like China, shutting down markets for American soybeans, beef, and pork. Exports that once fueled local economies have been cut off, leaving producers to stockpile or offload grain or livestock at a loss, or to accept bailout checks that can never replace the stability and reliability of open markets. Meanwhile, the cost of inputs for next year's crops has skyrocketed. We ask our government to pursue trade rooted in reciprocity and reason, trade that is both free and fair, built on predictability rather than politics. Farmers don't need managed crises, they need functioning markets. They need consistent rules, reliable partners, and confidence that the food they produce will reach the tables it's grown for. A strong farm economy depends on stable global relationships, not just prices, but principles. The Grange will always stand for trade that feeds families, sustains communities, and strengthens America. Dairy, the silent collapse. Across the country, barns that once echoed with the hum of milking machines now stand silent. Families who have spent generations supplying this nation's milk are shuttering their operations, not for lack of skill or will, but because the math no longer works. Input costs, feed, labor, compliance, have risen nearly 30% in 3 years, while milk prices have stagnated. Just ask Brother Matt Espenshade, a fifth-generation dairyman praying hard not to be the last of his line. Many dairies have been forced to sell herds built over generations, just like his. They have been pushed out by contracts and consolidation that favor processors and conglomerates over producers. In Wisconsin, more than 400 dairy farms closed in 2024 alone. In Vermont, more than half of those operating a decade ago are gone. North Dakota, once home to hundreds of family dairies, can now count its licensed producers on one hand. The Grange's position remains firm. A healthy agricultural sector requires fair markets, transparent pricing, and policies that sustain family-scale farms, not just corporate giants. We must urge policymakers to level the playing field, strengthen cooperative models that return value to those who do the work, and ensure that the next generation of farmers can afford to answer the calling. That means parity pricing models that reward production, antitrust enforcement that restores fairness, and accessible credit that empowers small and mid-sized producers to grow. The loss of small farms is not only an economic issue, it is a moral one. It erodes the values that built this nation: hard work, fairness, self-reliance, and community, the very values the Grange has protected for more than a century and a half. Every time a family farm closes, a community's identity erodes a little further. It's another classroom with fewer students, another main street with fewer customers, another community with one less anchor. Yet the story of rural America is not one of surrender, but of resilience, where dairies have fallen Some have transformed into creameries, cheese cooperatives, or diversified family operations like Brother Randy and Sister Mary Jordan's in Massachusetts that keep land and livelihood alive. The Grange believes that with fair markets, smart policy, and community investment, the next generation can once again make a living and a life from the land. Inputs, innovation, and independence. Agricultural input costs have reached record highs, more than $467 billion in 2025, driven by rising fuel, fertilizer, seed, and equipment prices. These costs, shouldered by American farmers, are the product not only of inflation, but of disrupted trade and consolidation that too often puts the interests of the few above the livelihoods of the many. We remember our history of some of the fights our earliest members waged against monopolies and welcome the USDA and Department of Justice investigations into whether consolidation among agricultural suppliers is driving prices higher. It is a step toward fairness, but only the first. The Grange has always encouraged and welcomed innovation, but innovation must save those who feed us, not those who exploit those innovations. AI-driven precision tools, drones, and data analytics hold great promise to transform our agricultural processes, but that promise can only be realized if the data belongs to those who gather it and need it most. The Grange will continue to fight for privacy, transparency, and ownership of farm data, ensuring that technology empowers, not exploits, those who feed our nation. Progress without principle is profit without purpose, and that is not the future we wish to see. The human hands of agriculture. Beyond markets, we face another crisis, the human one. Our farms, our dairies, and our orchards still need hands, yet immigration gridlock has left agriculture without the workforce it depends on. The Grange has long held that strong immigration and agricultural policies can and must coexist, that we can secure our borders while ensuring America's food security is never jeopardized by labor insecurity. Farmers and ranchers want to follow the law. They simply need a system that lets them do so without losing their crops, their markets, or their livelihoods. The reality is that without a reliable, legal, and fair agricultural workforce, we risk shortages not only in our fields, but across our entire food system. Agriculture has always been about partnerships between producer and consumer, between land and labor, between those who plant and those who harvest. Our national policies must honor and protect those partnerships, ensuring that the dignity of work and the promise of opportunity extend to everyone whose hands help feed this nation. When rural America thrives, so too does this nation. What we ask of policymakers for agriculture. We ask policymakers to treat agriculture as the national security issue it is, to continue to protect farmland ownership, and to add protections to supply chains and domestic processing capacity. Reform trade policy to prevent tariff volatility and restore trust in long-term export markets. Provide stability over subsidies, no more bailouts as the default response to failed policy. enforce antitrust law in agriculture's input and processing sectors, promoting transparency and fair competition. Support parity pricing and cooperative models that sustain family-scale producers. Invest in rural innovation, ensuring farmers own their data, benefit from precision agriculture, and have the broadband they need to use it. Build fair labor frameworks that secure the workforce agriculture depends on while upholding lawful hiring and humane conditions. Agriculture is not just an industry. Agriculture is the backbone of our independence, the quiet force that makes every other freedom possible. A nation that cannot feed itself cannot defend itself. When we lose farms, we lose more than acreage. We lose security, sovereignty, and self-reliance. Our adversaries no longer need armies to weaken us. They can do it through the slow erosion of our rural capacity, the quiet decay of our fields, our markets, and our will. Did you eat today? If so, don't just thank a farmer. Help us make sure they and their children and their grandchildren can continue to produce the safest, most affordable, and most abundant food system in the world. Yet food security is only the first line of defense. The next is the health and strength of the men, women, and children who make the abundance of that food possible. What good is the harvest if the hands that gather it are worn, uninsured, or untreated? Our rural hospitals, clinics, and caregivers form the quiet front line of national strength, and they too are under siege. Rural health, the lifeline of a nation. The health of a nation begins with the health of its people. Nowhere is that more evident or more endangered than in rural America. We speak often of food deserts, but we are now living in a growing landscape of healthcare deserts, entire regions where access has dried up and hope feels thin. Rural Health Report. Rural healthcare is at a breaking point. Earlier this year, we released our 2025 Rural Health Report, highlighting the widening gaps and the persistent disparities that threaten the well-being of rural Americans. Almost every rural health issue can be traced to one root problem: lack of access. Much of what we learned in 2020 with our initial Rural Health Report has not changed, or if it has not changed for the better. Here are a few of our findings. In the past 2 decades, more than 180 rural hospitals have closed, and over 700 more are now at risk. In maternal health, the crisis is staggering. Over 2.5 million women of childbearing age live in areas without adequate prenatal or maternal care. 2/3 of rural counties lack even one obstetric hospital, and more than half have no OB/GYN services at all. The same story plays out in cancer care. Over 60% of rural counties lack a single oncologist. Many highly treatable cancers, when caught early, go undiagnosed because screening and specialists are out of reach. Access to preventive care is also declining. Rural Americans are more likely to die prematurely from heart disease, cancer, stroke, and respiratory illness, not because these diseases are worse in rural America, but because care is harder to get. The Inflation Reduction Act caused pill penalty, makes matters worse by allowing pill-based treatments to come under government price controls years sooner than their injectable or infused counterparts. This unintended result is a disincentive for developing or maintaining medicines in pill form, the very form that's most accessible for patients, especially in rural areas, and pushes innovation toward infusions, requiring time, travel, and access to hospitals that many rural patients simply don't have. If you must drive hours to receive a treatment that could have been taken from your kitchen counter, that's not a medical system serving you, it's one failing you. The findings in our rural health report prove why the Grange is still not only important, but imperative. The experiences of our members reflect the data we gathered and tell a story that policymakers and practitioners will hear more clearly than any charts or graphs can speak. What we continue to see is that local Granges are tackling these big issues, each in their own way, and making a difference. From pop-up vaccination events and health fairs to educational community programs to doing what we do best, serving others by offering transportation to distant appointments and conducting fundraisers to defray some of the costs of care. Access and affordability. These events and initiatives are so important for awareness, preventive care, and screening. But when it's more than basic support someone in a rural community is looking for, the Grange and our members must shift from being community servants to advocates. We must ensure that our policymakers understand that for too many communities, the nearest hospital is miles too far. The nearest doctor is booked for months, or the nearest specialist is found only in another zip code or another state. Rural residents are older, travel farther, and pay more for care if they can get it at all. Nearly 1 in 4 rural Americans report skipping needed treatment because of cost. Prescription prices continue to rise faster than wages, and insurance premiums consume family budgets. The digital divide that cuts across America has become a health divide, blocking access to telemedicine that could bridge the gap between patients and providers. We cannot allow zip codes to determine life expectancy. The Grange continues to support the 340B drug pricing program and other initiatives that allow rural and community hospitals to purchase critical medicines at fair cost. These programs aren't loopholes, they are lifelines, and they must be protected from those who would profit at the expense of patients. We urge Congress to ensure stable, long-term funding of essential programs that guarantee equitable access to care for our most vulnerable citizens, including the elderly, children, and those facing financial hardship, through long-standing and essential programs such as Medicaid, Medicare, and the Children's Health Insurance Program. These are not entitlements or handouts. They are investments in the health, dignity, and productivity of our people. We also call for expanded rural residency programs and incentives that bring doctors, nurses, and behavioral health specialists to underserved communities, because access without providers is an empty promise. Our mission has always been to close the distance between challenge and change, between what is and what ought to be. We must fully fund and protect rural hospitals, clinics, and emergency services, and provide targeted relief to those in frontier counties where a single facility may serve thousands of square miles. The future of rural healthcare depends not just on infrastructure, but on people. And those who care for others deserve care in return. That includes the millions who juggle jobs and families while tending to aging parents, veterans, and neighbors. The Grange calls on lawmakers to pass measures like the Credit for Caring Act and the Alleviating Barriers for Caregivers Act, which provide tax relief, retirement security, and access to training and support networks. Our veterans deserve more than thanks. They deserve access to care close to home without waiting months or driving for hours for help. Home, too, is a challenge for our veterans who experience homelessness at a higher rate than the general population. Today, more than 32,000 veterans are classified as homeless. And tonight, nearly 40% of them will sleep unsheltered. Even one is too many. Another crisis for our veterans is mental health. According to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, the number of U.S. veterans who died by suicide in 2022, the latest year for which data is available, was 6,407. This number equates to 17.6 veteran suicides per day in 2022. We must work to provide our veterans with the mental health resources they need. There are two notable and successful initiatives focused on veteran mental health and suicide prevention that every Grange can promote and support through the National Grange's Project Sustenance programming. The first is the Veterans Crisis Line operated by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, a 24/7 confidential resource for veterans and their friends and family. What has made it effective? It is accessible day or night, and the veteran doesn't have to be enrolled in VA healthcare or benefits to use it. The second is the Wounded Warrior Project, a nonprofit organization working in many of our communities that offers programs for veterans, including mental health support, education, peer connection, and interventions targeted at suicide risk. Mental health, the hidden crisis. But mental health is an epidemic in more than just the nation's veteran population. It is a crisis throughout all of rural America. Isolation, financial strain, and the relentless pressures of farm life has led to some of the highest suicide rates in the nation among agricultural workers. For every headline about market prices, there is a quiet story of a farmer who couldn't see a way forward, and a community left to wonder what more it could have done. Findings from our rural health report show suicide rates in rural counties are 60% higher than in urban areas, and 65% of rural counties have no psychiatrist at all. Since 2021, the Grange has partnered with Rural Minds, a nonprofit dedicated to confronting the stigma surrounding mental illness in rural America. Together, we've launched programs that give communities the language and tools to talk about mental health, not with shame, but with compassion and courage. Let us continue to work to address mental illness and to help break the silence. There is no shame in seeking help, only strength in survival and healing of community. Behind every patient is a caregiver, often a spouse, a son or daughter, or a neighbor who steps up when the system steps back. We must recognize and support these caregivers with the training, respite, and resources that they need. The Grange continues to champion caregiver tax credits and relief programs that strengthen families and communities alike. Likewise, our rural healthcare workforce, the nurses, the aides, and technicians who keep clinics running, deserves fair wages, opportunities for advancement, and a voice in shaping rural health policy. Rural providers must be partners, not afterthoughts, in state and national health planning. Healthcare is not charity, it is infrastructure and it is national security. Because when rural Americans are healthy, America is strong. The Grange has always believed that healthcare is not a privilege of geography, but a right of citizenship. Our call is simple and unshakable. Every American, no matter where they live or which insurance plan they do or do not have, deserves timely, affordable, quality care. We ask policymakers to fully fund and protect rural hospitals and clinics through stable reimbursement systems and targeted emergency relief programs that keep care local. Preserve and strengthen the 340B drug pricing program that supports affordable access to life-saving medicines in rural and community hospitals. Fix the Inflation Reduction Act's pill penalty to keep affordable oral treatments on the market. Reform pharmacy benefit manager practices to ensure transparency and prevent pricing manipulation that harms patients and hospitals. Invest in broadband expansion to ensure telehealth reaches every household, because connectivity is now as essential to health as clean water and electricity. Expand rural medical education and residency incentives to build and retain a sustainable healthcare workforce in every region. Ensure stable, non-negotiable funding for essential programs that safeguard the health of vulnerable populations, including Medicaid, Medicare, and the Children's Health Insurance Program. Support accessible, culturally informed mental health services designed specifically for agricultural and rural communities, delivered through schools, local nonprofits, and faith-based partners. Increase funding for rural mental health initiatives and simplify grant access for local nonprofits that can reach those most in need. Recognize and equip caregivers as vital members of the healthcare system. Prioritize access to fresh, nutritious foods for those enrolled in assistance programs, because quality food ensures a higher quality of life. The health of our people cannot be measured in profits or quarterly reports. It is measured in lives saved and communities sustained. Every nurse who works a double shift, every paramedic who answers the midnight call, every volunteer who staffs a rural clinic, these are the quiet heroes of rural America, and the Grange stands with them. Health depends on more than care. It depends on the roads, the bridges, water systems, and broadband that keep rural Americans alive and communities alive. Infrastructure is not just concrete and steel. It is commitment made visible. It is the road that connects a farmer to market, the bridge that carries a child to school, the fiber connection that links a clinic to a specialist hundreds of miles away, and the water system that keeps a small town alive. For too long, rural America has been told to wait its turn for funding, for broadband, for housing, for repairs. The truth is, when rural America waits, America stalls. The Grange believes that infrastructure is not an expense. It is an investment in freedom, opportunity, and the promise of equal footing. Broadband is now as vital to daily life as electricity once was. From the railroads that bound this country together to the electric lines that lit the first farmhouses, progress has always begun where people believed that rural life mattered as much as urban life. That belief must guide us again. We must rebuild not only the roads and bridges that carry us, ships too, but the communities that depend on them, ensuring access to clean water, affordable housing, reliable transportation, and the digital networks that power modern life. When we build for rural America, we build for everyone, for the farmer and the teacher, the nurse and the truck driver, the parent and the small business owner who depend on rural infrastructure every single day. Transportation, the arteries of commerce. Our rural roads, bridges, and railways are the arteries through which the lifeblood of this nation flows. Too many of those arteries are clogged, cracked, or collapsing. Deferred maintenance and underinvestment have left farmers paying the price in broken equipment, delayed deliveries, and lost opportunities. We call for renewed federal, state, and local partnerships that put rural transportation at the center of infrastructure policy, not the edge of it. Repairing rural roads and bridges isn't just about asphalt, it's about access to markets, to schools, to medical care, and to hope. A safe road can mean the difference between profit and loss, opportunity and isolation, life and death. We must treat infrastructure not as a patchwork of projects, but as a national covenant, one that says to every citizen, you matter, and we will not leave you behind. A road to somewhere is a promise to someone. Broadband, the modern lifeline. In the 21st century, broadband is no longer a luxury. It is a lifeline. Its reach is a matter of both resilience and national security. It is the new power grid, the new highway, the new classroom, the connection tying rural communities to the opportunities of the modern world. Yet today, millions of Americans still live beyond the reach of reliable, affordable internet, shut out from education, healthcare, markets, and the digital economy. The Grange calls on federal and state leaders to complete the job of rural connectivity once and for all. Every farm, every business, and every home deserves equitable access to the tools of modern life, not just the bare minimum. We must ensure that broadband maps are accurate and that funding reaches the last mile, not just the most profitable mile. We must ensure that local cooperatives, municipalities, and rural providers are empowered to build, own, and maintain the infrastructure that serves their neighbors. A connected nation is a stronger nation, and when rural America connects, America leads. Rural development and Main Street renewal. Infrastructure alone cannot sustain rural life without opportunity to match it. Many small towns stand today as monuments to what America built and what America left behind. We know this truth. The rural economy still holds the raw material of America's greatness, ingenuity, work ethic, and an unmatched sense of community. The Grange calls for renewed investment in small town entrepreneurship, local manufacturing, and cooperative enterprises. We must help rural innovators access capital, connect to markets, and compete on fair terms. Revitalizing Main Street means more than paving storefronts. It means saving stories, preserving pride, and giving young people a reason to come home. That means tackling the barriers that make it hard for people to stay, especially workforce housing and childcare. The Grange supports federal and state programs that invest in small business grants, rural cooperatives in entrepreneurship, local food systems, and community revitalization. These investments don't just sustain economies, they sustain identities. When small towns thrive, the whole nation stands taller. Safe, affordable housing is essential to the stability of every community. Yet across rural America, homes are aging faster than they can be replaced, and construction costs continue to outpace wages. Rent prices in many rural communities and small towns have risen sharply in recent years, outpacing local earnings and making it increasingly difficult for families, young workers, and seniors to find stable housing. What were once affordable places to live are now seeing both current and future residents priced out, threatening the stability and vitality of rural life. Low-wage and essential workers, grocery clerks, caregivers, gas attendants, teachers, are being displaced from the very communities they serve. The further they must travel to work, the harder it becomes to sustain the life they've built. Rural gentrification may not look like urban high-rises, but its impact is just as real. We call for renewed public-private partnerships that expand rural housing availability and options, strengthen energy efficiency, and ensure that teachers, nurses, first responders, factory workers, and farmers can live where they work. Affordable housing isn't just a matter of equity, it's a matter of continuity. Communities cannot thrive when those who sustain them cannot stay. We must also strengthen rural resilience, preparing communities for wildfires, floods, and storms that test both infrastructure and resolve. Rural areas often face the greatest impact from these natural disasters and receive the least recovery. That must change. Investing in disaster preparedness, community planning, and local emergency response isn't just sound policy. It's how we protect lives, livelihoods, and the legacy of rural America. True resilience isn't built in the aftermath, it's built in the preparation. We ask policymakers to complete universal broadband coverage, reaching every household, farm, and business with reliable, affordable access. Prioritize rural roads, bridges, and railways in infrastructure funding, ensuring safe and efficient transport for goods and people. Invest in small town entrepreneurship, cooperatives, and local manufacturing that keep profits, pride, and opportunity close to home. expand rural and workforce housing initiatives so that those who serve their communities can afford to live in them. Bolster rural resilience through proactive disaster preparedness, fair recovery funding, and local control of emergency resources. Infrastructure is how a nation builds its faith in itself, one road, one bridge, one connection at a time. Every new fiber connection and every mile of paved road are a promise kept to the generations who came before and a gift to those who will follow. Rural America doesn't ask for charity. We ask for partnership and a fair chance to build the future with our own hands. Education has always been the great equalizer, the quiet force that lifts families, strengthens communities, and fuels innovation. Yet in many rural areas, opportunity remains fettered by geography and an artificial zoning boundary. Our task is to close that gap. That means investing in strong public schools, robust community colleges, research institutions that support agriculture innovation, and partnerships that connect learning to local opportunity. Career and technical education must again be seen not as a second choice, but as a cornerstone of a strong rural workforce. We call for expanded apprenticeship programs, scholarships for rural educators, and incentives for students to return and serve in the places that raised them. When we invest in rural minds, we invest in rural futures. Rural schools, the beating heart of the community. In rural America, the school is often the heart of the town, where children learn, neighbors gather, and pride takes root. However, shrinking enrollments, aging facilities, and teacher shortages threaten that heartbeat. Too many schools face consolidation or closure. And when a school closes, a community begins to fade. We must ensure that rural schools have the resources to remain centers of learning and of life. That means adequate funding, competitive salaries to attract and retain teachers, and flexibility in curriculum to meet the needs of local students and local economies. The Grange supports federal and state efforts to modernize rural schools, expand broadband and digital access for students, and protect the essential roles schools play as community anchors. We also urge policymakers to prioritize rural teacher recruitment and retention through targeted loan forgiveness, housing support, and mentorship programs. Rural America's workforce is skilled, capable, and resilient, but it must be equipped for a changing economy. New industries, from renewable energy to precision agriculture to advanced manufacturing, are rising across the nation. Yet too often, rural workers are left without the training, access, or resources needed to seize these opportunities. We believe the Grange has a role in the development of individuals, a call to make our Grange halls not just gathering places, but gateways, hubs for lifelong learning, workforce training, and community advancement. A hall with lights on is a classroom waiting to happen. But current exclusions of fraternal organizations from many federal funding streams reduce the opportunities we have to make this possible. The Grange calls for a renewed national commitment to career and technical education, apprenticeships, agriculture education programs, and partnerships that connect schools employers, and community organizations. We urge the prioritization of programs that prepare young people not just for jobs, but for leadership as well. We believe every person deserves the dignity of work that sustains both family and community. And we know that a strong nation doesn't just build roads and bridges, it builds people. The Grange has long believed that young people are not the leaders of tomorrow, they are the leaders of today. Through our Junior Grange and Grange Youth programs, mentorship, and leadership opportunities, we help cultivate civic-minded Americans who understand community, like democracy, is not a spectator sport. Every young person who learns to lead in a Grange Hall, or in a community center, a school club, 4-H, FFA, Scouts, or another reputable youth program, who runs a meeting, organizes a project, or speaks with courage, carries forward the legacy of empowerment. They remind us that leadership has nothing to do with age and everything to do with initiative. We must continue to invest in programs that give young people not only a seat at the table, but the power and purpose to build the tables where others will one day gather. The next generation will inherit more than our institutions. They will inherit our example. Let it be one of service, civility, and courage. We must continue investment in these community-based learning and leadership development programs because this may be the only place many young people access such opportunities. The hard truth is that higher education has become, for too many families, a burden rather than a bridge. The rising cost of college, coupled with limited local options in rural areas, has driven countless young people away from their hometowns, and too often away from rural life altogether. This exodus, known as rural brain drain, is not inevitable. It's a symptom of policy neglect. The Grange calls for renewed support for rural serving colleges, agricultural universities, and programs that encourage students to study, work, and return home to strengthen their communities. We must also expand loan forgiveness and service programs for graduates who choose to work in rural health, education, agriculture, and public service. Education should open doors, not close them because of debt. When we open those doors for rural students, we keep open the doors of our communities for innovation, for leadership, for life. We ask policymakers to fully fund rural education and teacher development programs, ensuring equitable access and modern resources for every school. Expand broadband-enabled learning, providing every student with the tools to learn from anywhere. Strengthen workforce development initiatives, including apprenticeships, trade education, and partnerships with local industries. Support rural colleges, agricultural universities, and scholarship programs that tie education to local opportunity and encourage students to return home. Invest in youth leadership and civic education, supporting not only 501c3 charities, but well-governed 501c5, C8, and C10 organizations that are developing leaders in real communities every day, preparing the next generation to serve and to lead with integrity. Education is not just the transfer of knowledge, it is the transmission of hope. It is how a nation renews its promise and how people pass forward both wisdom and will. When we invest in education and workforce development, we are not simply teaching skills, we are shaping citizens. When we empower our youth, we ensure that the ideals we cherish, liberty, equality, fellowship, and service, will outlast us all. The Grange has always believed that leadership begins with service, that we lead not because we seek power, but because we are willing to shoulder responsibility. Whether it's running for office, coaching a youth team, volunteering at a food bank or volunteer fire department, or simply checking on a neighbor, service is essential and is the currency that keeps democracy alive. The Grange calls for a revival of local civic engagement, town meetings, community problem solving, and neighborhood leadership that puts people before politics. We call on every Grange member and every citizen who believes in the promise of America to renew the habits of volunteerism as well as civility and cooperation. We ask policymakers to foster civic education in schools and communities, ensuring every student, every citizen understands both the rights and the responsibilities of citizenship. To support volunteerism and public service initiatives that strengthen local leadership. To protect the integrity of civic spaces, schools, libraries, community centers, and all public places where citizens meet and learn. To invest in programs that bridge divides, bringing rural and urban Americans together around shared challenges and shared purpose. We ask every citizen to take part, to join, to vote, to volunteer, and to care. Democracy is not something done for us, it is something done by us. Civic life is what binds our American quilt. And when that binding phrase, we do not discard the quilt, we mend it. That is the work of the Grange, to stitch communities back together. One act of service, one act of understanding, one act of love for this country at a time. We will continue to teach, to lead, and to model what civic life can be when guided by a belief in these words. In essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In all things, charity. Our founders did not build this order to stand still. They built it to stand for something. They believed that the ordinary citizens working together could lift a nation. That belief remains our birthright and our responsibility. We do not ask if the Grange still matters. We show why it always will. As we look toward the next chapter of our shared story, beyond America's 250th anniversary, we must see ourselves as our founders once did, builders of a better tomorrow. The work before us is not easy, but it is essential. We are called to preserve the land that feeds us, to protect the communities that sustain us, and to prepare the minds that will lead us, and to rebuild the trust that unites us. We are called to ensure that no rural town fades because of neglect, that no voice goes unheard, and that no generation forgets what it means to belong to something greater than self. So today we commit that the Grange will not only continue to do good work in our communities, but that we will continue to advocate at every level for our communities and for every American. This is the Grange's charge, and it is America's need. The Grange was built by people who refused to yield to hardship, who met challenge with courage, and who believed that the measure of one's life is found in the service of others. That same courage is needed now. Courage to change what must be changed. Courage to lead where others hesitate. The future will not be written by those who wait for permission. It will be written by those who show up. So let us show up in our communities, in our state houses, in our schools, and in our Grange halls, not as keepers of an institution, but as authors of a movement. Let us welcome others to do so with us, shoulder to shoulder, amplifying our voice and announcing to the world, rural America has a trusted voice, and it is the Grange. May our example remind this nation that strength does not come from wealth or power, but from we the people, bound together by purpose, sustained by service, and committed to one another. So let us go forward, proud of our past, confident in our purpose, and unstoppable in our pursuit of the future. Together, we will keep this great order and this great nation Grange strong.